Welcome back. We made it. Part 3. It's been a long time here now. We've taken 2 breaks, and we're coming back to do our third go on our composition here, our painting. We're doing loose, fun gestural drawing of figures in watercolor, and we've had a lot of fun so far. It's been really exciting. We're doing a nice country scene, 2 women chatting in the backyard. Sunny day out, beautiful breeze. We're just thinking it's a summer day, maybe spring day. Just having fun here. We're getting into the mood of watercolor painting and having a great time. And we're just going through our steps here as we finish up our painting. So we've got 90% of our painting now complete, and we're just going to do the final touches after everything has dried. So on our last video, part 2. We did probably 50% of the painting, and in part 1, if you've missed part 1 and part 2, please go back, start with part 1, watch that, go to part 2, and then start part 3. It's important to watch each video in sequence. You get a lot out of it that way, and it's a lot more easily understood to get this effect with your watercolor paintings. So we're going to start back up here again. Part 3, we're doing our finishing touches. And we're going to always remember, as we start back up again, we've let the painting dry for about 15-20 minutes. We have our palette with our paint. We're going to wipe it up and clean it up here. We're going to have a nice, fresh, clean palette to start with for our last final touch-ups to our composition here. Some fresh water. We change our water. Each time we take a break, we get some fresh water, clean water for our painting. And our colors here, if we're doing some spritzing of water just to moisten up the paints a little bit. As you can see, the paints are definitely moist, and I squeezed a new paint into the palette just before I started this series here. And we're using a number 4 brush. Round brush. These are the 3 brushes I used, a 4, an 8, and then a 2. I didn't use the 2 too much, but that's the 4 and the 8. Number 4 and number 8, sable brush, round brush with good points. We have our light insignia on the upper right hand side of our watercolor paper up here. This lets us know that the light's coming from this side of the painting. And this helps us to determine where we're going to put our shadowing and where we're going to let the light exist on the figures and in some of the areas. Here we have our colors we're using. And we went over those colors in part 1 and part 2 in detail of the colors we're using. Now we're just finishing up with a little bit of lighter tonal value of blue, some cobalt blue. So we have some little bit of shadowing on the towels and some laundry on the line outside here. And we're again doing the final details here. We're going in now with some darks, some burnt umber to put in some details of the door. So this is a nice country house here with some wood siding on the house. And here we have our colors. When we're going in with our darks at the end of the painting, we have a mixture of burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson, and we kind of just mix and mingle those together to get our darks. We just use them very lightly. We go very carefully. We use the very pointy tip of our brush to do some of the ornamental work here. And now it's easy at this point, when we're doing our painting, sometimes I think we've all done it. We've sometimes got carried away and did a little bit too much detail. So I'm very careful here. Let's be careful not to do too much detail, just a little bit to, make some accents here and there on the composition, but not go with too many details that can kind of spoil the look of the painting. We're trying to keep it nice and loose and fresh looking, and too many details will tend to make it look a little more overworked. I'm doing some shadowing in the back section of the house over there by the windows. And some more details on the door here. And we'll do some shadowing underneath the steps of the back door of the house. And that's some burnt umber with some French ultramarine blue, maybe a little touch of sap green in there too. You can never go wrong with repeating the same colors over and over throughout your composition and your paintings. And if you ever have an issue where you add too much water or paint, a little paper towel or tissue just to blot up some water and paint. And we're going to do some details on the, maybe that's a towel or a shirt on the line there. And we're just going to put a little bit of detail just to make it a little more, kind of make it read true as something on the line there. And some subtlety, just a little bit of a indication of a line there. For the clothesline, just a little indication, doesn't have to be too detailed. And then we'll do a little bit of some trees over on the top of that roof section there, just to kind of let's see if I can adjust the picture a little bit here. Okay, so there we're going to add a little bit of trees in the background behind the roof of the country house here. And we'll fast forward a little bit here. And there I was using sap green, and then I added a little bit of burnt umber to sort of gray down the green a little bit. So that it was, this is, the trees back here are a little more subdued in the painting. That's not the focal point so much, so I added that little bit of burnt umber into the green to make it grayed down a little bit. And we'll just kind of move along here a little bit. And some more darks, by the windows here. Just again, I used a tissue there to blot up some paint. If things aren't going good and you find an area is getting out of control a little bit, don't be afraid to use the tissue. But I would not do it, a lot. Here and there, if you need to just blot up some paint, you can do it. But it's not the greatest of techniques because it can look a little bit noticeable. And then here we're doing some indications of the boards on the house, on the siding of the house. And of course I'm using a little bit of darker paint there, and as well this was well dry. These areas here were well dry from earlier parts. We took breaks as we went, so these areas you can go back in and do your dark details and accents once these areas dry. you'll find that that's an important thing when you watercolor paint, to be very conscious of what sections are dry and what sections are still wet and are still drying, because that'll just help you invaluably. For instance, if this area here was still wet, the blue in the roof over here, and then we went ahead and put green in there, it would all mingle together and make funny looking marks. But since this area was dry where the blue is here, we can go in with that greenery for like, let's say, an indication of a tree or some leaves, and that's fine. It works out good because this is already dried, this part here where the blue is. So we're having fun. We're doing our final details. I'm just doing a shadow underneath the eave of the roof here, the rake edge of the roof. And again, these are just the final details. I try to use them very sparingly, the darks, to essentially indicate where there are lines, so that those are the steps of the house, and there's an overhang where each of the steps are. So I put that little bit of shadowing under the steps. And then on the door, we added those little bit of shadow areas just so we could see the individual panels of the door, but we didn't paint every single line of those panels in the door. We just touched a few areas with some darker paint just so that we know it's there, and it kind of just helps the composition where we know that's the door there, and we see those little bit of lines, and looks good, looks fresh, looks not too overworked. And I think we could use more details around perhaps the clothes on the clothesline, but it looks pretty good the way it is there. I think that'll be fine with the way it is. And for this quick composition, where the focal point is the figures, we enjoyed ourselves here. We had a great time, and now once we're done, we can take some mats and put some mats over our painting and just see how it looks when it's more framed out. Always helps. And then there we can see what it sort of looks like as a finished painting with a mat around it. And it looks much better with the framing around it, the nice white border. And I think we have a good painting here. We have a really enjoyable figure, a nice enjoyable loose watercolor of figures. And here we're going to use some darker matte colors. Some people like to use darker mattes on their watercolors, and it does look good. I tend to like the lighter color mattes most often, but the darker mattes do look good as well. All right, so this is part 3. We've had a great time painting our figures, and we'll see you next time. We'll do some more figures in watercolor. Bye now.